The world was a graveyard. Empty streets stretched in all directions, covered with rubble and remains of torn lives. Broken buildings projected into the gray sky like jagged teeth, their windows long since broken and their interiors clean. Nature had begun to recover the earth, weeds and vines snaking through cracks in the pavement. Jhonatan moved silently through this desolate landscape, his steps drowned by the thick layer of dust. He kept his head down, always attentive to any sign of movement. The sun began to set, projecting long shadows that seemed to follow him. In his hands he held a spear firmly, improvised, a sharp rebar attached to a piece of pipe with adhesive tape. That was his only weapon against the undead who roamed the city. They were slow and irrational, but in great numbers. A single mistake could signify your end. As he walked, Jhonatan's mind wandered into a time before the chaos. He remembered walking through those same streets on the way to school, backpack in a shoulder. The other children watched him, whispering to each other, "Hey, look, it's Blacky. Why don't you go back to Africa? Shouldn't you be picking cotton?" He shook the bitter memories and hastened the step. There was no more time for self-pity. On Maple Street, a low moan broke the silence, shuddering him. He leaned down behind a burnt car and peeked through the hood. There they were, dozen of zombies stagger in the middle of the street, dirty, skeletal with milky eyes, and emptiness that could still smell it. His heart was beating hard. He knew that he could not stay hidden for long. The zombies were attracted by the slightest noise. Breathing deeply, he grabbed and tried to calm the nerves. That was the new reality, a constant struggle for survival against an enemy who ignored any skin color or trauma. Past. But he cared. He thought of the people who tormented him in the past. Even without merit, he could not leave them behind. With a sigh, he stepped out of the hiding and attracted the attention of zombies, who turned to him with a hunger. Fierce. Preparing for battle, Jhonatan raised the spear, determined to survive. He fought with precision, each blow knocking down a zombie. But the exhaustion soon, he imposed. When he thought he could not stand it anymore, he heard a familiar voice. "Jhonatan, here!" It was Sarah, an old schoolmate, waving frantically at the roof of a building. He approached, guiding her and other survivors away of the zombies. Seeing the fear and gratitude on their faces, Jhonatan realized that his mission was beyond merely surviving. He was building a new community. As they crossed the destroyed city, Jhonatan reflected on the past and its own growth, knew that to survive they would need union, not rancor. In front of the safe haven, he looked at Sarah and said, "We can't change the past, but we can choose what we do now. That is our moment of transformation." Inside the shelter, Jhonatan was proudly received by Mr. Johnson, his former professor. "You have become an inspiration," he said. Showed that change is possible, and Jhonatan, feeling the responsibility that he now carried, knew that his real test was yet to come. Here is an enhanced version of the text, keeping the tone somber and reflective and reinforcing the plot and clarity. Jhonatan guided the group of survivors through the desolate streets, his eyes attentive, searching every shadow for signs of danger. The weight of their lives rested upon his shoulders, and he felt a responsibility that he never imagined. Carry. As they advanced through the devastated city, filled with wandering zombies, he reflected on the journey that had led them there. "We are almost there," he assured the group, his voice firm, despite anxiety growing. "The hiding place is just ahead. We just need to keep our focus and continue." Walking beside him, Sarah walked in silence. The young woman who had called him from roof had become a source of strength and support, and their gratitude and determination reminded Jhonatan of the positive impact he was beginning to have. "Jhonatan, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing," she said with emotion. "I know it's not easy, especially with all that has happened, but you're showing us a new way, a way to overcome our past and unite." Jhonatan nodded, without turning his eyes from the way ahead. "Past, Sarah. It's about what we choose to do now. We can't change what happened, but we can make a difference. That's what matters. As they approached the hiding place, a wave of relief took over the group. The building stood in front, its sturdy walls and barricaded windows promising protection in the midst of chaos. "We got it," Jhonatan whispered, exhausted but satisfied. "We are safe, for now." Inside the shelter, the group's steps echoed through the empty space. The construction was a symbol of human resilience, a sanctuary built by the survivors of initial outbreak. Jhonatan led the group into a large room where other refugees had already. The environment was full of emotions, relief, fear, and a deep sense of community. As the newcomers settled in, Jhonatan noticed a familiar face. "Mr. Johnson," he called, the voice echoing through the room. Mr. Johnson, a former Jhonatan teacher, approached with a warm smile. "Jhonatan, my boy, I heard of your heroic deeds. You became a legend. Here?" Jhonatan touched with evident humility. "It's not about me, sir. We are all together in it. I'm glad you did." With a proud look, Mr. Johnson put his hand on the Jhonatan's shoulder. "You made an exceptional young man. His leadership and courage inspire everyone. I have not doubts that it will continue to make a difference." Jhonatan's heart filled with emotion, the recognition of his former professor, someone who always admired, meant more than any word could express. As the group settled into the shelter, Jhonatan had a moment of introspection. He thought about the pain of the past, the racism that faced and that this caused him. But now, in the renewed hope of union, he saw a glimpse of transformation. "We can't ignore the past, Jhonatan," said Mr. Johnson, interrupting his thoughts. "But we can learn from it and move on." His actions showed that change is possible and that we can unite as a true community. Jhonatan nodded, renewed. "That's exactly what I want to achieve, sir. I want to show that we can overcome our prejudices and build a better world. A world where everyone is equal, regardless of their origin or color." This text reinforces the clarity and structure, highlighting the theme of overcoming and building a community in the midst of chaos.